Right now, you are hungry, or you will be soon. And when that happens, you'll reach for something warm. Toast, a roasted potato, a piece of meat that's been sitting over heat until it turns soft and brown and falls apart in your mouth. You won't think about it for even a second. Now imagine you can't. Imagine the fire is gone, and it's never coming back. That potato is a hard, bitter, chalky lump you can barely bite into. That meat is cold and rubbery and slick, and you have to tear it apart with your teeth like a dog. You chew and chew and chew, and your jaw aches, and you're still hungry. For almost every animal that has ever lived, this is just eating. A chimpanzee spends around 6 hours a day, half its waking life, just chewing raw food. But you don't. Somewhere back in the dark, one of your ancestors did something no animal had ever done. They took their food and they put it into fire. And that single act may have rewired our entire species. It may have built the brain you're using to understand this sentence. So what was the first thing humans ever cooked? The answer changes what you think made us human in the first place. Let's start with the problem, because you have to understand just how bad a deal raw food really is. Food is fuel, but raw food is fuel your body can barely get at. Think of a raw potato, or a raw root pulled straight out of the ground. It's packed with energy, dense starch, locked up tight inside tough cell walls and hard, coiled molecules your gut simply cannot break open. You could eat that raw potato, and most of its calories would pass straight through you and come out the other end, completely unused. You did all the chewing for almost nothing. Raw meat is a different problem, but just as brutal. Cold muscle is a slippery, elastic knot of protein and connective tissue. Your flat little human teeth were never built to shear through it. Chimpanzees will chew a single mouthful of raw monkey meat for hours and still not finish it. This is the wall every animal on Earth runs into. There is only so much energy you can rip out of raw food, and only so many hours in a day to chew it. A gorilla solves this by eating almost constantly, jaws grinding from sunup to sundown, hauling around a huge barrel gut just to process the flood of leaves. That's the price of raw. Your whole day belongs to your stomach. So how did we escape it? How did we become the only creature that doesn't spend half its life chewing? The answer is the most important cooking trick ever discovered, and we discovered it before we were even fully human. To cook, first you need fire, and taming fire is the hinge that the entire human story swings on. Nobody planted that first fire. It came as lightning strikes, and wildfires sweeping across dry grassland. For most animals, fire is pure terror. You run from it. But somewhere, some ancestor of ours did the opposite. They walked toward the smoke, and they found something in the ashes. Seeds cracked open, roots gone soft, small animals already dead, and, for the first time, easy to eat. The exact date is one of the great arguments in all of science. Solid, undeniable evidence of controlled fire, burnt bone, ash, hearths, shows up by around 1 million years ago, in a South African cave called Wonderwork. But here's the thing. The scientist who built the whole theory, a Harvard anthropologist named Richard Wrangham, thinks cooking is far older than that. He points to a specific human ancestor, Homo erectus. And Homo erectus is where this gets strange. Because around this same time, roughly 1.5 to 2 million years ago, our ancestors' bodies suddenly changed in a way that made no sense. Look at what happened to Homo erectus, and it's a genuine mystery. Their teeth got smaller. Now, if your food is getting tougher, evolution gives you bigger teeth and stronger jaws to handle it. That's the rule. But erectus went the other way. Smaller teeth, weaker jaws, a smaller mouth. As if their food had suddenly become much, much easier to eat. Their guts got smaller too. We can tell from the shape of the ribcage and pelvis in the fossils that the huge, barrel-shaped, gorilla-style belly was shrinking. The long, energy-hungry digestive tract that processes raw food was being quietly downsized. And at the very same time, 2 other things got bigger: their bodies and their brains. Here is the paradox that should stop you cold. Smaller teeth, a smaller gut, less chewing equipment, less digesting equipment, and yet a bigger body and a bigger, hungrier brain to run. It's like ripping the engine out of a car and finding it drives faster. Something was feeding all that new growth, but the tools for extracting energy from food were shrinking, not growing. So where were the extra calories coming from? They weren't coming from the food itself. They were coming from what was being done to the food before it was eaten. Because heat, it turns out, is a form of digestion you do outside your body. When you cook a starchy root, the heat bursts those tough cell walls and unwinds those tightly coiled starch molecules. Suddenly, all that locked away energy is exposed and ready to absorb. When you cook meat, the heat unravels the tangled proteins and melts the connective tissue, turning that leathery knot into something soft that falls apart. Cooking even does your immune system's work for you, killing the parasites and bacteria that raw food carries. Fire does, on the outside, the exact job your teeth and stomach were straining to do on the inside. It's pre-chewing, it's pre-digestion, and the payoff is enormous. A modern scientist named Rachel Carmody ran the experiment directly. She fed mice raw food, and the very same food cooked, and the mice eating cooked food gained more weight from an identical amount. Same food, more usable energy. The only difference was the fire. Think about what that means for a hungry ancestor. Cooking didn't just make food nicer. It cracked open a hidden reserve of calories that no other animal on the planet could reach. And it gave back something even more precious than energy: time. All those hours a chimp burns through chewing. Suddenly they were free. Free to hunt, to make tools, to travel, to raise children, to sit around a fire and become something new. But the calories are only half the story. Because to understand why this built a brain, you have to understand a brutal trade-off happening deep inside the body. Your brain is the single most expensive thing you own. It is about 2% of your body weight, and it burns roughly 20% of all the energy you use, even right now, doing nothing but reading. It is a monstrously greedy organ, and every big-brained ancestor had to find the fuel to run one. In the early 1990s, two scientists, Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler, noticed something clever. There's one other organ in your body, almost as expensive to run as a brain: your gut. Digestion is enormously costly, and they realized that across the primates, animals with big guts tend to have small brains, and animals with small guts tend to have big brains. It's a seesaw. You can only afford one greedy organ, not two. They called it the expensive tissue hypothesis, and it lays out the deal perfectly. If you want to grow a big, hungry brain, you have to pay for it by shrinking something else expensive. The obvious candidate is the gut. But there's a catch. You can only afford a small gut if your food is easy enough to digest that a small gut can handle it. And that is exactly what cooking provides. Cooked food is pre-digested food. It lets you get away with a smaller gut. The energy and effort you save on digestion, you can spend on the most expensive organ of all. Cooking pays for the brain. It's the deal that runs through the whole story. Fire shrinks the gut, and the gut pays for the brain, and the brain makes us us. So, finally, what was actually on the menu? What was the first thing to ever touch a fire? We can't dig up a burnt meal from 2 million years ago and read the label. But the evidence points hard at two things. The first is roots and tubers, the wild ancestors of things like potatoes and yams, the swollen underground parts of plants where they store their energy. They're everywhere, even in a dry landscape. You can dig them up year-round. And raw, they're a hard, bitter, near-useless lump. But throw them in the coals, and they become soft, sweet, and packed with unlocked calories. For a hungry ancestor, a fire and a digging stick was a machine for turning worthless dirt roots into fuel. The second is meat. Our ancestors were already scavenging and hunting, and there is early evidence of cut-marked and burnt bone. Cooked meat is safer, softer, and gives up far more of its protein. Roots for the reliable everyday fuel, meat for the rich prize. That's the likely first menu. Not a recipe, just food, and fire, and an ancestor who noticed that one made the other better. And here's where the whole story turns over, and it's the part that unsettles people. We tell ourselves a flattering version of how we got smart. First, we grew these big, brilliant brains, because we were special, because we were destined for it. And then, being so clever, we invented cooking. Brains first. Cooking as a reward for being smart. But look again at the order of events. Look at Homo erectus, the smaller teeth, the shrinking gut, the growing brain, appearing before our brains reached their modern size, not after. That is not the body of an animal that got smart and then learned to cook. That is the body of an animal that was already cooking and got smart because of it. Flip the whole thing around. We didn't grow big brains and then, cleverly, discover fire. It may be the exact opposite. Cooking came first, and cooking is what made the big brain possible. The fire didn't reward our intelligence. The fire built it. We are not the clever ape that learned to cook. We are the ape that cooks, and grew clever as the bill came due. And here's the proof that we never went back. There is no human culture anywhere on Earth that eats its food entirely raw. Not one. Modern people who try to live on purely raw food, even with blenders, even with grocery stores full of the richest food in history, often lose dangerous amounts of weight, and many women stop menstruating, their bodies deciding there simply isn't enough energy to spare. Take away the fire, and even a modern human body starts to fail. We are that dependent. Cooking isn't a hobby we picked up. It's a part of our biology now, as much as our lungs or our hands. So the next time you smell something roasting, bread in a toaster, meat on a grill, understand what you're really smelling. You're smelling the oldest technology our species ever had. Older than farming, older than writing, older, maybe, than being fully human at all. Every warm meal you've ever eaten is a copy of that first one, passed hand to hand down an unbroken line of fires stretching back almost 2 million years, to an ancestor whose name will never be known, who walked toward the smoke instead of away from it. They didn't know they were doing anything. They were just hungry, and the food near the fire was easier to eat, but they were lighting the fuse on the human brain. Every thought you have ever had was, in a sense, cooked into you. So here's the question worth sitting with. We call ourselves the thinking animal, the wise one, the species that conquered the earth with its mind. But if that mind was only ever paid for by fire, if we are smart because we cook, and not the other way around, then how much of what you call your genius really belongs to you, and how much belongs to a fire someone else lit a long, long time ago?